delighted to be here with you. It's Mensah Oteh, and I want to talk about something that I've never really spoken in detail previously. I'm going to talk about how to overcome low self-esteem, how to handle self-confidence issues, and maybe if you have a struggle with a level of anxiety that potentially is leading towards depression. Now, today's session has come as a result of a request. Someone reached out to me on social media and said, I'm struggling. I seem to have very low self-esteem and I have very low self-confidence, and whenever I go around people, I find that I leave very soon because I don't believe in myself. And they asked me what they could do to overcome this regular experience. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I was going to reply on Instagram. But I decided instead that there might be other people who perhaps going through the same experience. And so I said, why don't we just make it a live session? I'm going to talk to you and share some ideas. And if there are other people in the same category and other people experiencing the same thing, perhaps they could share how they got through it whilst I'm sharing some ideas with you. So what I want to do in the next few minutes with you is just share what I believe are some ways and some potentially strategies that you can use to get you back on track and get you living more of a fulfilled life and an experience. And let me start by saying this: no one has all the answers. We've been given what I consider to be one of the greatest gifts, a gift that separates us from all other life forms: mind and speech, the ability to use our mind to create whatever we want, but also words, spoken words, but also internal thoughts. Unfortunately, no two people can experience the same feeling. And I say that simply so you understand that I don't really know what you might be going through. I don't claim to be an expert in this subject. But one of the things I'm going to try and do is try and relate to what you might be going through intellectually. Emotionally, I can't do that because I can't feel how you feel. I can position myself to be in that same feeling, but no one else can feel how another feels. I think it's important that we start off in that part of setting the foundation. So what I'm going to share with you, perhaps the entirety of what I share may not really apply to your situation. What I want you to do is be open to some of the ideas. Don't accept everything that I share with you, but also don't reject what I share with you. Rather, what I'd like you to do is ask yourself a simple question as you listen. Can this information help me overcome this regular reoccurrence of low self-esteem? And if the answer is yes, and if it's just one single idea, then I want you to use it, and use it in such a way that it helps you live the life that you've been born to live. I believe that all of us have been given life, and we've been given life abundantly. We've been given this life to live the extraordinary life. But to live that life, you need wisdom, you need understanding, you need awareness. But more importantly, you need good ideas. And so if you can find some ideas from what I share and you can apply that, I believe genuinely that it could help you. Now, here is my view on self-esteem and self-confidence, and maybe a low self-worth, perhaps anxiety, fear, whereby you don't feel yourself to be equal to other people. Here is my view. A lot of what I'm sharing in the next few minutes is subjective. Obviously, it's based on my experiences, but also based on my understanding. You don't have to accept everything that I share. But here is my view. If you have a low self-esteem issue, if you have low self-confidence, if you feel as though you're not deserving compared to other people, it's not a problem. That is not the problem. It's the symptom that there is a problem. And I think that's important. I'm going to say that again. Low self-confidence, low self-esteem, anxiety, fear, depression It's not a problem. It's a symptom that there is a problem. And for so many people, we spend a lot of time trying to deal with the symptom without dealing with the problem. So what I'm going to do in this session is I'm going to try and focus on the problem. This is not some motivational session to get you really excited and in a few days you go back to how you've always felt. I believe that education should always precede inspiration and motivation. Both are very important, I have to say. But education is what allows you to raise your level of understanding and awareness and find good ideas. And when combined with inspiration, you could achieve anything you want. So, if you have a regular reoccurrence of low self-esteem, low self-confidence, anxiety, fear, and maybe depression, it's a symptom that you have a problem. And the true cause of the problem, I believe, in my opinion, comes down to three things. Number one, I think it's a wisdom problem. Number two, I think it's a conditioning. In other words, it's a result of your habits and paradigms. But also number three, and the most important, it's a self-image problem. I'm going to touch on each of those very briefly to perhaps shed more light so you can understand what I mean by that. Most people believe that they're not worth much. I think that's very sad. You know, in 2014, the Oppenheimer diamonds was sold in Geneva for approximately £40 million. It's a beautiful piece of diamond, a very small piece of stone. They're roughly about 0.00001% in the entire world. So someone perceived that piece of stone to be worth 40 million. Now, a lot of people say the value of something is based on what you're willing to pay for it. I think there is some truth in that statement. But I also believe that the value of something is also based on its rarity. In other words, how rare is it? If I walked into the shops and I decided to buy a jacket, and if that jacket was mass produced, it would be a lot cheaper than if I walked into a tailored shop and they customize the jacket for me. So the value of something is decided not only by other people's opinion, but is really decided by its rarity. Now, the Oppenheimer diamond is one in, you might say, 100,000. You, on the other hand, you have a value that cannot be quantified. There's 7 billion people in the world right now, today. 7 billion people. And I find it really fascinating and remarkable that amongst all the 7 billion people, none of us is like you. 7 billion, none like you. None of us can dream. None of us can sing, dance, smile, love, think. None of us even has the same DNA or fingerprints like you. You're truly unique. You're 1 in 7 billion. Now, interestingly, we've had about 107 billion who've lived, who've journeyed through this beautiful life and who've passed on. Of the 7 billion people alive today and the 107 billion people who have lived, none of us, none of them are like you. Now, long after I'm gone and long after your journey is over, life will continue and there could be trillions of people still to come. None of them will be like you. So, when it comes to rarity, your value is too much to be put a monetary term towards or to be assigned a number. You're 1 in 7 today. I think you're pretty special. You've got to recognize that you're unique. And you've got to recognize that you're born for a special reason, a purpose. And because you're 1 in 7 billion, there's never been another like you. So most people will never understand you. It's not your responsibility to try to make everyone understand you. Your responsibility is simply live the life that you've been born to live. Now, I started with that statement to make a point. If you have low self-esteem because you don't think you're worth much, I think it's simply an indication of a lack of understanding. That's the reason I said wisdom is one of the problems. You don't really know who you are. Now I'm going to talk about that in more detail as we move forward, but let me start by perhaps sharing what I believe are some of the maybe sources of low self-esteem and depression and self-confidence. Now, from my experience growing up, having journeyed from Africa to London, I've lived both worlds and I've traveled all around the world. But I came to the conclusion that there are about 5 factors. Those factors could perhaps extend to 7 or 8, but let me talk about 5. 5 factors that affect how you perceive yourself and who you really are. Number 1 is the events that have happened in your life, your past. Number 2 are the experiences that you've been involved in, good, bad, or indifferent. Number 3 are the relationships and the people you have around you. Number 4 are your dreams and your goals, the vision you have of the future. Number 5 is your self-image, the picture, the portrait you have about yourself. Now you can extend those 5 to include a few other items, such as the decisions you've made in the past, the habits that you have. The point I'm trying to make is if you go through all of that list, there is a common denominator in all of those items. Events, experiences, relationships, goals, dreams, vision, your self-image, your decisions. You find a consistency. The lowest common denominator in all of that is you. So, if you really want to change your life, if you want to change your experiences, if you want to feel more confident, you have to change you first. I think the struggle that most people have is they're trying to change the external environment, they're trying to change other people's opinions without changing themselves. But to change yourself, you've got to understand and you've got to know yourself. Now, from my journey coming from Africa, one of the things I found, and having traveled all over the world, I found that there are some basic reasons that people feel that they're not worth much. I've come to the realization, perhaps the conclusion, that it comes down to about 4 different factors. Number 1 is simply that people don't feel worthy either because of a physical attribute. It's physical. Maybe you don't like the size of your ears, or perhaps you don't like the size of your nose. Maybe you feel as though you're too short, you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too fat. It's physical. For some other people, it's mental. Perhaps you don't believe that you're as intelligent or you have a high IQ compared to another person. It's all mental, it's psychological. Now, for some other people, it could be experiences, perhaps past relationships, you've been hurt, and that has left you really in pieces. And whenever you meet people, you feel as though, or you're reminded of the experiences you've had in the past. Now, it doesn't really matter whether it's physical, mental, experiences, doesn't even matter if it's spiritual. The most important point is this: that you are the most important part of the equation. And if you're going to overcome self-esteem issues and self-confidence issues, if you're going to overcome depression, you have to understand yourself. My theme today is really focused on giving you some better understanding, sharing some more light on who you really are. I believe if you understand who you are, a lot of the problems and symptoms will disappear. Now let me start by saying this. I began my journey and I've experienced a level of perhaps low self-esteem and low confidence, and it's not a permanent state. We journey through those states at various times in our lives. But one of the things I found so many years ago was when I had hit rock bottom, I found that I only started to change my life when I started to study myself. The more I studied me, the more I understood who I was. And interestingly, the more I studied myself, the more I recognized that we are all essentially the same. If you were to pick a piece of magnet, a demagnetized piece of magnet and a magnetized piece of magnet, the internal molecules of both are the same. The only difference is the rearrangement or the arrangement of the particles inside. We are all the same, but we have different arrangements expressed in different bodies and different forms. But internally, we're all the same. There is only one mind. There is only one spirit. But there are various bodies. And the more I studied myself, the more I understood people a little bit better, because I realized that they're simply a reflection of me in a different form. To understand yourself, you've got to recognize that there are 3 parts of your personality, should I choose to use that word. Now this is important, so I think it's worth listening to carefully. Most people who are experiencing depression, low self-esteem, low self-confidence are operating at the lowest level of their personality. The 3 levels of your personality begin with the spiritual level. Then you have the mental level, and then you have the physical level. At the spiritual level is the understanding that you are a spirit. This is what I call a garment. It's like a piece of cloth. When the time is right, I'm going to let go of this piece of cloth, but I still live. There is just life. If you understand science, then you understand that nothing is created or destroyed. At the spiritual level, you're perfect. You're so perfect that you cannot improve yourself. At the mental level, you have a mind that has been given to you. You have an imagination, and that mind allows you to create whatever you experience physically. But you've also been given a body. Now your body comes with various interesting parts to it. For some people, you might have been born with defects. You might have been born with things perhaps that you don't like about yourself. You've got to live in the spiritual level of your personality, because your physical is not you. It's simply a garment you're wearing. Now, through my journey, I found most people suffer from low self-esteem and low self-confidence simply because they are judging based on what they do physically. Now let me start with the highest level and just perhaps explain how you can get yourself back into your true state. It's very simple, it's very easy. There are 4 ways to be able to live in that spiritual level of awareness. Now what am I talking about now? I'm talking about awareness. I'm talking about understanding. I'm talking about consciousness. Now how do you live in that spiritual state? Very simple. The first is love. When you're really in a state of pure love, you cannot see other people, you cannot see yourself less. You are love, you simply have to express love. And love is the highest level of what you can do to live in the spiritual level of your personality. In other words, you've got to love yourself. You've got to love yourself because you cannot give what you don't have. And if you have low self-esteem, it's an indication that you haven't discovered self-love. Self-love begins the journey. And that means you look at yourself and you're happy with who you are. You're happy with your shortcomings. You're happy because you recognize that you're perfect at the spiritual level. And though you might have shortfalls in the physical level, perhaps you don't have a big enough bank account, or perhaps you don't have a beautiful home, perhaps you don't have a level of IQ compared to other people, you're still occupying the highest level of love. Now, the second way of experiencing the spiritual level is through what we call gratitude. You cannot really be grateful and be sad. You can't be grateful and be fearful. You can't be grateful and feel less. You see, because gratitude draws you closer to the source of everything in life. Gratitude is you acknowledging what has been given to you. And it's really you accepting that you have everything in you And therefore, you don't look at yourself as someone or some person that needs perhaps the affirmation of other people. You look at yourself as someone who is perfect in every way. Now, the next is through what we call purpose. Now, purpose is important. I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but let me say this. Everything created has a purpose. Everyone alive was born for a purpose. You have to discover the reason you were born. And it's important because once you recognize your purpose for living, then you understand where your gifts and your talents and your abilities reside. A lot of people don't understand their true life's purpose and calling. If I go to the sea, let's assume I go to the Red Sea, and I were to pull out a fish, and I toss the fish into the air and say, I want you to fly. The fish is not designed, it's not created to fly. It looks very dumb. As a matter of fact, if I left the fish out of water for too long, the fish would die. The reason is simply, the fish's gifts and abilities only function in an environment. Now likewise, if I take a bird and I put the bird in water, the bird will drown. It's not designed to swim. Now each and every one of us has a purpose. Our purpose reveals our passion. Our purpose reveals our talents, gifts, skills, but also our purpose reveals the environment where we will excel the most. A lot of people are living and operating in an area of their weakness. You got to find where your strength zone lies and get into the environment where people celebrate you instead of tolerate you. Now, if you're in an environment where people don't see the greatness in you, it's simply an indication that you're not meant to be in that environment. You're not called to the entire world. You're called to a few people. Find where you're celebrated, get away from where you're tolerated, because when you're in the right environment, the greatness in you, the genius in you awakens. There is something in you that you haven't discovered yet. Now, I'm reminded by a fascinating story. A young boy walks up to an older man working in a workshop, and the older man is chipping away on a piece of marble. And the young boy says to the man, "What are you doing?" The man says, "Well, there's an angel within this piece of marble, this piece of stone, and I'm trying to let the angel free. I'm trying to set it free." The young boy walks away, and the artist continues to chip away on this piece of stone until he has a beautiful looking sculpture. Now we call that sculpture today David. If you've ever been to Florence in Italy, then you perhaps have seen seen pictures of David. Now the artist was Michelangelo. Now what's fascinating about that story is this. About 20 or 30 years before Michelangelo was born, the piece of stone was commissioned to a very well experienced artist. The artist took the stone and said there was nothing that could be done with the stone, that it was useless. After Michelangelo was born, a few years after he was born, the same piece of stone and marble was given to a different artist. The artist looked at the stone and said, "The marble is too thin. There's nothing I can do with this. I can't produce any meaningful piece of work with this stone." The same piece of marble was given to Michelangelo, and he could see David in that stone. Now I share that story to simply ask you a question. What are you not seeing in yourself? And to ask a question, when are you going to stop worrying about people's opinions about you and start chipping away on yourself so that you can reveal the greatness, you can reveal the angel, you can reveal that genius that lies within you to the world? If you're worried about other people's opinion, if you're focused on what people think about you, if your self-confidence and low self-esteem is a result of people's opinions, then I think you haven't discovered the greatness in you yet. You need to go back and study yourself. And so wisdom is the first part of the journey. You've got to study yourself and find out who you really are. And that really begins at the spiritual level. Now, let's come down from the spiritual level briefly to the mental level. We all have a mind. There is only one mind in the world. Just one. Different arrangements, same mind. Different configurations, same mind. That simply means that no one has any mental capacity more than you do. We all have access to the same mind. It's how we use it. Now, the great writer says that as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. In other words, whether you think you can or you think you can't, as Henry Ford said, you're right. Everything you see around you began in someone's thought, in someone's imagination. Imagination creates reality. People's reaction to you is based on the thoughts you create in your mind, even before you come into their presence. And one of the things I said to someone a few months ago was this. A lot of us believe that our thoughts go into the past and are forgotten. Let me share something that I learned a number of years ago. Nothing is created or destroyed. Your thoughts, your spoken words, they don't go into your past, they go into your future. Your thoughts go into your future. So my question to you is, what are you thinking about every day? Now, if we were to just sit down and imagine ourselves to be in a movie theater and watching on the screen all of the thoughts in your mind, what thoughts would you have on a consistent basis, and what words would you speak of yourself? Now, I found that most people are either their best coach, best critic, or best cheerleader. Your thoughts are creating your experiences. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that everything you've experienced in life is as a result of your thoughts. No, all I'm simply saying is people react to you based on the thoughts you have about yourself. If you have empowering, positive, encouraging thoughts, if you see yourself as someone who is helpful, intelligent, beautiful, attractive, people react to you based on what you send out. In other words, the vibration you create from your thoughts. Also, the thoughts you create decide your feelings. Your feelings will decide your actions. Your actions repeated habitually become habits. Your habits will then form and fashion your attitude, your behavior, and your character. Those three together produce your results and form your destiny. So, if you want to change your life, if you want to become more outgoing, if you want to have more self-confidence, you have to start by changing your thinking. Change your thinking. Whatever you can conceive in your mind, if you believe it, you can achieve it. So my first question to you would be, what picture do you have in your mind about you? Now, I found a lot of people have a picture that is distorted, a self-image, a self-portrait that needs to be changed. And we'll talk about that shortly. But I want to draw your attention and talk about something, perhaps it might sound and seem a little bit deeper. I want to talk about your mind. And more important, I want to talk about an aspect of your mind that we call your faculties. Every one of us has what we call 5 senses, our central faculties. We also have what we call 5 higher faculties, or rather 6 higher faculties, I should say. We have 5 senses and 6 higher faculties. Your 5 senses are simply touch, taste, smell, sound, sight. For many people, we're living based on our senses. We see things, we smell things, we hear things, and we react. If you want to be successful, if you want to be happy, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to create a great life, if you want high self-confidence, if you want to have high self-esteem, if you want to live in a beautiful state, you have to learn how to use your higher faculties. Now, what are your higher faculties? Very briefly, let me just give it 6 of them to you so you understand how this works. Imagination is the first. In other words, one of the ladies that I find really remarkable is Helen Keller. And she said, she was asked the question, she was blind. And she was asked the question, what could be worse than being blind? And she said, having sight, but no vision. When you see with your eyes, we call that sight. When you see with your imagination, we call that vision. If you want to be happy, if you want to recreate a beautiful life, you've got to learn how to discipline yourself to see beyond what you see with your eyes. See through your mind. Imagine yourself healthy. Imagine yourself beautiful. Imagine yourself happy. Imagine yourself as you would wish to be. And hold on to that picture. And let that picture control how you feel. Those feelings will generate thoughts which will lead you to having better results. Imagination is your first of the 6 higher faculties. The second one is reason. In other words, you're thinking. Are you thinking positive thoughts? Are you thinking negative thoughts? And a lot of us have been conditioned automatically that we don't even know when we're thinking negative thought. Now, if you have reoccurring depressive or depression feelings as a result of you not feeling adequate, it's a habit you have. You've conditioned yourself to the point where you think in a certain way. That has to change. You've got to use your reasoning faculty to choose positive thoughts. Someone said, I don't know who, said, whatever is pure, whatever is just, whatever is beautiful, whatever is noble, whatever is peaceful, think on those things. In other words, you must walk away from negative thoughts and thinking and just focus on what part of you is beautiful, what part of you is good, what part of your life is worth celebrating. Now, the third of the higher faculties is memory. Now, that is one that I have struggled with, and I think a lot of people struggle with. We have experiences. Unfortunately, we hold on to our past in our memory. So whenever we go through a present experience, we're very quick to go back and look at what we did in the past and allow the results of our past to judge how we feel. Well, that has to change. Your memory should only be used for storing up victories and success experiences and empowering experiences, so that whenever you feel down, you do a 360 or 180 turnaround and go back to your past and go back into your memory and pull out a great experience that empowers you, that gives you inspiration, that gives you more focus to keep going. But that has to be disciplined, that has to be learned, that has to be taught. You also have what we call intuition. Now, it's probably best I don't go into the detail of each and every one of those, but the point I'm trying to make is this. If you have reoccurring self-doubt, low self-esteem, depression, it's an indication that you're operating with your 5 senses alone. You're judging based on what you see. You have to use your higher faculties, because that is where the good life begins. You've got to use your mind. You've got to use your imagination. You've got to use your memory. You've got to use your reasoning faculty. You've got to think right. Now, the lowest level of your personality is the physical level. And yes, some of us are endowed physically than others. And some other people are perceived to be more beautiful. Some other people are perceived to be more intelligent. But the physical level of your personality is the lowest level. To live on the lowest level of your personality is you inviting misery and unhappiness. And the reason is simple. The body you have that you think is extremely beautiful today will age. Whatever you consider you have in material possession, time will pass. You cannot live on the physical level of your personality. You must simply live on the spiritual level, keep a mental level that is sound, and let the physical level be. Now, that doesn't mean in any way that you shouldn't work on the physical level. Of course you have to. You have two parts. You have wealth, you have health. You are responsible for taking care of yourself. But you got to understand what you can change and what you can't change. I love something that one person once said. He said that makeup was an indication that we could improve on what God, intelligence, wisdom, Allah, whatever you choose to call it, created. And I like that. There's no limit to what you have. If there's something about yourself that you don't like, if you can change it within reason to make you feel better, you should. But changing it without living on the spiritual level would mean that you're always looking for something without really feeling that you have it within. But that doesn't mean perhaps you have something about you that you're not happy with, that you can't change it. Let me join in a story that might be interesting. In the 1960s, there was a plastic surgeon called Maxwell Maltz. Remarkable surgeon, remarkable. And he found that every time he had patients who came to him for cosmetic surgery, some of them had scars on their faces and their bodies, some of them had deformations, they wanted to change. Now he learned something. The more he worked with these patients, he came to a conclusion that every one of us has a self-image. If you stood in front of a full-length mirror, what you see reflected back to you is the image, your image. But he found that we have two images. One is what we see if we stand in front of the mirror, but number two is the image we have of ourselves inside. Now, in his experience, he found that even when he had performed what he thought was his best piece of work on someone, maybe there was a scar, a surgery, and they looked beautiful. He found even after he had finished and took them back to the mirror, they looked at the mirror and they couldn't see the improvement, because in their mind, they still had the scar in their internal self-image. He came to a conclusion that until you change the image you have about yourself inside, any changes you make on the outside is simply commentary. Now, why am I bringing this up? I want to make a point. And the point is this. If there's something you don't like about yourself, you can change it. But you have to recognize that you're dealing with a symptom, not the problem. At the foundation is the problem. You have to see yourself first as perfect spiritually, because this is simply a garment. A time will come when you have to let it go. So don't be focused on trying to make this so beautiful. It wasn't designed to last that long. It has a duration of its time. Now, I say this particularly because a lot of people that I've met who feel inadequate, they feel inadequate because perhaps they don't have the money, they don't have the physical looks, they don't have the social connection. And all of these are all great things to have to make life meaningful. But it doesn't make life complete. It's a part of what we need to make life enjoyable, but it's not everything. Now, we've dealt with the three levels of your personality, and I think perhaps what you should do is study yourself a little bit more. Find out who you really are, find out what your purpose is, find out what makes you come alive, find out where your strengths lie, but also learn to think right and do whatever you can do on the physical, exercise, nutrition. I'm not suggesting you go for plastic surgery, but in your case, it could be something that you want to explore. I'm not a judge. I don't want to be in that position, but I want to make a point. To attempt to change your external world without first changing your internal world is a struggle against life. You find misery, you find a lot of unhappiness, because change is constant, and you're never going to meet someone, and you're never going to meet a world that accepts you completely. There's only been one of you. There will only be one of you, so not everyone will understand you. And I found so many people are trying to be good replicas to other people when they were born as originals. Find the group, the environment that celebrates you, and then you can teach them about who you are, what you're here to do, and let the rest of the world just be. Now I want to take you a step further as I draw this to a conclusion. I want to talk about how you begin that journey of change. That's the most important thing. What I've shared so far, I think, perhaps has increased your understanding, perhaps has increased your awareness, but it's about change. How do you take yourself from where you are right now to where you want to be? You cannot change an old habit by simply trying to push it away. You have to displace an old habit with a new habit. Also, you don't simply try to change your self-image. You have to recreate a new image of yourself. And I think that's where we should start. Now, I began today's session by saying that wisdom, habits, and self-image are the three problems that you must address if you want to overcome depression, self-confidence, or low self-esteem. Now, for some people watching, you might be thinking, I can't understand what you're saying, but my depression and my pain is not as a result of my external environment or how people think about me. Yours could be perhaps as a result of a loss. You've lost someone. I know what that feels like. In 2004, I sadly lost a brother, and for so many months, we went through so many experiences of asking questions. We couldn't understand why he had to go. And some people say you go through 6 levels or 5 levels of recovery after you lose someone. For so many people, some stay in one level, and that is simply they don't accept what has happened. Now, I found peace, and I found calmness, and I found joy, even in my pain, when I decided to change the meaning that I associated with the experience. You see, every time I thought about the fact that he had died, I felt pain. I started today by saying that we have mind and speech, spoken words. We have the ability to change our mind, we have the ability to choose our thoughts, but we also have the ability to change our words. By changing the meaning I associated with the experience, I changed my feelings, and I changed how I reacted to the experience. And part of that came from my beliefs, and the belief is simply that there is just life. He had journeyed through, and he had to let go of the garment, but he still lives on. And by changing that meaning from saying, okay, well, he has died, to he has graduated to something better, I automatically changed how I felt. And a lot of the pain that I felt suddenly started to drift away. But here is the point as well. Before I got to the level of changing the meaning, I had to increase my wisdom. I started asking questions, I started thinking. And the more I searched for answers, the more I started to recognize that I was operating at a level of understanding that was too low. I don't know what your particular situation might be. It may not be similar to mine. Yours could be very unique. The point is this: wisdom is the answer to everything. You have to go find wisdom. Increase your understanding, because it's simply an indication. If you're experiencing that on a regular basis, it means there's something you don't know. There's a void that has to be filled. Now, amongst the 3 items that I mentioned, wisdom, habits, and self-image, Your self-image is the most important part that must be changed. And that's what I want to dwell on. I want to talk about that briefly as I conclude. How do you change your self-image? How do you become the person you want to be? It's very simple. It starts with a decision. Now that sounds too simplistic, but it's very true. It starts with you simply deciding who you want to be. Now imagine that you had a blank canvas and you've been allowed to paint your masterpiece. You can choose to paint that masterpiece yourself, or you can decide, I can perhaps call on the likes of Picasso, Michelangelo, Rembrandt. You can bring in these great artists and use their knowledge to paint your masterpiece. The point I'm making is this: to create your new or your better self-image, you don't have to do it alone. You can look for people who are living the life that you admire, people who are living respectable, beautiful, fulfilled life, and find out parts of their personality and parts of their character that you admire, and start using those ingredients to form the image of who you would like to be. Success leaves behind clues, and it's very simple. You simply have to find success and replicate it. In other words, to change your image, you have to start by creating a script of who you want to be. And that script has to be descriptive. Write it down. Describe the person you would want to be. If you could live a life that you would really be proud of, what would that life be like? So create a script of who you want to be. That's number one. Number two, once you've created the script, you have to discipline yourself to live in the feeling that that wish, that dream has been fulfilled already. Now that's the most difficult part of all I've shared today, because it's going to contradict everything you do by your senses. Here I'm asking you to live in your imagination rather than in your senses. But if you can discipline yourself to judge by vision rather than sight, what you find is, by living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you will start to attract all of the things that you need to help you become that person you want to be. Very quickly, what happens is you change your thoughts, you change your feelings, you change your action, and automatically that changes your attitude. And as your attitude changes, your results change. Now, once you've created a script of who you want to be, and you're getting emotionally involved with that idea, you have to take it a step further. It's documented. You've given yourself a timeline for achieving it, because that's important. You can't just have a vague vision. You have to have a timeline. Once you put a timeline, then you now have what we call a goal. You have a goal. It's in written form. It's crystallized on paper. It has a timeline. What you must then do is take action. Start acting like the person you want to be. Now, you take action physically, but also you take action mentally. The mental action is more important to get you started than the physical action, because your thoughts decide your feelings and your feelings create your actions. You take action physically by starting to act like the person you want to be. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger's journey and story. It's said that if you've read any of his biographies or books, he journeyed from Austria to the United States. How? He simply had a vision of who he wanted to be. He wanted to be a bodybuilder. He had seen magazines of people who were doing it, and he fell in love with the idea. And every day he would play pictures in his mind of him on stage winning the Mr. Olympia competition. He journeyed from Austria to the United States in pursuit of that dream. He achieved the dream. Then he decided he wanted to be a movie star. Before he started, he did exactly what he did before. He sat down, he created a vision of who he wanted to be. But he was asked the question, as soon as he started, he had tried, he'd made a film, the film failed, did very poorly. He was asked by a reporter, now how do you intend to break into Hollywood? What are you going to do next? Your first movie has been a flop. What do you intend to do? And he said something that I think is worth remembering. He said, I'm going to do the same thing that I did in bodybuilding. I'm going to create a vision of who I want to be, and then I'm going to live into that vision as though it were already real. In other words, you have to start acting like the person you want to be. It's not there yet physically, but you can act like that person. Now, on the mental side, there are two activities that you have to do. Number one, mental movies. A mental movie is simply imagining yourself in a cinema room where there is just one seat and there's a large screen. Imagine yourself in your mind walking into that room. You sit down, the screen comes up, and it's the life you want to live that you're watching. You're watching yourself in the future, interacting with people. Now, what you're doing here, you're allowing your sensory faculty of sight to see in advance what you want. Then just ask yourself, how does it feel? You watching yourself live that life. The second part of the mental activity is what we call mental rehearsal. In other words, in your mind, see yourself through your mind's eye, living that life, interacting, touching, tasting, being with people. And by doing that, what you find is that it helps you stay consistent and take the actions required. Now, that's how you begin the journey. But once you've done that, it doesn't stop there. You must now have what we call strategies to keep you focused. One of them is self-talk. If you're not into self-talk, you have to get into it. Self-talk is you saying to yourself what you would wish other people would say to you. Make a list of great words, empowering words, beautiful and inspiring, motivation, encouraging, loving words that you can say about yourself. You could say, I'm beautiful, I'm happy, I'm blessed. Make a list. You can write anything about yourself, but let it be empowering. And every day, first thing in the morning, read out your self-talk list. Before you go to bed, reaffirm yourself with your words. They're very powerful. What you're doing here, by doing it daily and consistently, is you're creating new habits. You've created the image. Now you're creating a routine and a pattern, a habitual way of displacing your old thoughts and beliefs. Because if you have reoccurring self-doubt and lack of self-belief and depression, it's simply a paradigm. It's a conditioned way of thinking and living. We want to bring in a new one that can displace the old one. Now, once you have self-talk going, you need affirmations. Affirmations are critical. You have to affirm yourself every day. Self-love must always precede loving others. You cannot give what you do not have. So get used to affirming yourself so that when you affirm other people, it comes from really deep within you. Affirm yourself daily. Now, you've started by creating a picture of who you want to be. You've done your mental preparation, rehearsal, your movies daily. You're taking action. Now, as you take action, what you'll find is that some course correction will be needed. There'll be days when you perhaps deviate from your vision. You have to correct yourself and come back. We call that corrective steps. It's not going to change immediately. It takes years, it takes months, it takes weeks before you truly change your conditioned lifestyle. But what you need is a corrective way of looking back at what you've done and making changes. I often say at the end of every day, ask yourself two questions. What did I do right? What could I have done differently? And then all you have to do is celebrate what you did well and take the feedback from what you could have done differently and make some changes. So every day you need a review moment, a time to sit down quietly and ask yourself, were my thoughts today empowering? Were my words empowering? Were my activities empowering? If the answer is yes, that's what you want to keep doing. Now, the ones that were not empowering, you want to discipline yourself to do less of those and take all that energy instead and focus on creating more empowering beliefs, habits, thoughts, feelings about yourself. Now, I hope that's perhaps been useful, I don't really know. But here is the point. You're on a journey. The journey will lead to self-discovery. The journey becomes exciting the more you understand yourself. If you understand yourself, I believe genuinely that if you truly understand yourself, it's almost impossible for you to feel as though you're inadequate, because what you find is all of the greatness of the world, all of the energy, infinite intelligence is in you. And if you have everything in you, then you don't need anything outside. You just have to find a way of expressing what's in you. This is a journey. Don't be too critical about yourself. Enjoy the journey. You will fall down, but you will get back up. But don't make a habit of staying down. Take it one step at a time. I hope that's been useful. I hope you find your happiness. I hope you find joy. More than anything, I hope you find fulfillment in whatever you do. But remember this. You've been given life, and you're expected to have life and have it abundantly. You're expected to live an extraordinary life. It begins by choice. Life change doesn't begin by chance or luck. It begins by choices. In other words, you have to make a decision. Simply decide that you're going to live the life that you want to live. And if there's any part of you that perhaps is holding you down, limitations or limits, let them go. Find more empowering beliefs that can help you become your best self and that can help you experience this great life that we have been given. It's a short one, very short one. Make it a really interesting one. God bless.